Today, I'm going to show you the updated and perfected long-range loadouts inside of Warzone, because there have been some big discoveries since my last video, and there have been some minor adjustments to the meta with buffs and nerfs in the most recent mid-season update. We're going to cover everything in rapid-fire fashion, from snipers to long-range lasers, as well as some mid-range aggressive builds that you need to consider. Without further ado, let's get into it. First and foremost, we have the K98, and yes, it was nerfed, but it wasn't nerfed nearly as bad as everyone was fearing, okay? So they nerfed the bullet velocity down from 660 to 620. Honestly, you're not going to feel that. They did nerf the damage range down from 63 down to 55. And once you factor in the multiples, it kind of pulls it down by about 8 to 10 meters at those max ranges. You may feel that difference, but where you're probably going to feel it is they reduced the aim assist. It is not completely gone, but for my controller players, you may notice you have to kind of refine your timing again, because the aim assist on a sniper rifle is pretty overpowered. But fortunately, with the builds that I'm going to show you, you're going to have faster ADS, a cleaner sight picture, and less flinch, and that should hopefully make up for the reduced aim assist that you might be having compared to your previous builds. So the first build that I'm going to show you is actually kind of a pay-to-win K98. Now, I'm going to show you an alternative that some would argue, myself included, is a little bit better. But if you're not familiar, a lot of people are running this as their main car because of that clean pink dot. And this is the SPX scope, and it has a really clean dot that allows you to quickly acquire your target, and it's definitely a little bit pay to win. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into marksman rifle, you're going to go all the way over to the side for the SAB 50, and then you're going to go over to the high senpai blueprint. If you don't already own it, you just simply click right bumper and it would be in your available blueprints. From there, what you would do is, as you're building out your sniper, you're going to select the SPX scope. You're going to equip a skin for it by pressing X, and then you can select the high senpai. And as you can see there, it has a pink dot available right there. And then we're going to complete the build. These three right here are just absolute must-have attachments. We need the precision long barrel, we need the sonic suppressor, and we need the high grain, because that's going to give us the most damage range and most bullet velocity that we need. And fortunately, it still brings that max damage range all the way out to 75 meters, as well as bullet velocity of 925, which is plenty fast. And then we bring it all home with the Razorhawk Light. The Razorhawk Light helps us out by getting our aim down sight speed all the way up to 390 milliseconds, which is pretty dang fast for a sniper rifle. But there is one thing. If there's a developer watching, before we get on to build number 2, the scopes, every single scope is not aligned, okay? Here's an example. We're going to take a shot. We're going to take a shot. Okay, we got 2 dots there on the board. If you may have noticed, as I aim down sight, you might see, as I hold my breath, there's the green laser, and then there's the pink dot. They are not aligned. And you might be wondering, okay, Isaac, which one is accurate? The green laser is accurate. And I've tried this with every different scope, including the classic scope and the one that I'm about to show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this shot. I'm backing up as far as I can. The first shot, I'm going to line up with the pink dot. The second shot, I'm going to line up with the green dot. And you will see the pink dot, you can see 2 distinct bullet holes. The green dot, you can only see 1. So basically, the green dot flew through that. So if you're ever shooting someone at very far distances with any K98, I don't know how many times they've messed up the scope alignment. They messed it up on this one. The green dot is accurate. The pink dot is not. But honestly, you would have to be at a pretty extreme distance for that difference in location to really matter. But I still think that's something the developers should clean up. So if you guys haven't already, make sure you take a screenshot. This is the pink dot pay to win K98. Make sure you're taking your screenshot. If you are taking a screenshot, make sure you subscribe. But without further ado, let's get on to build number 2. But first, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that is PrizePicks. They're America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million users. And if you're anything like me, you got a whole bunch of buddies that are involved in fantasy apps, whether it's NFL, MLB, NHL, and more. Well, PrizePicks offers those, and they also offer esports as well, from League of Legends to CSGO to Apex Legends, and especially for us, Call of Duty League. And this weekend they head to Major 4, which is the last major before championships here in Dallas next month. And you can build a lineup of simply picking more or less on things like kills, first bloods, headshots, and more. And so I've decided to build a lineup of the industry veterans who typically excel on land. We've got Attach with more than 51.5 kills, Dashy with more than 49.5 kills, and Clayster with more than 48.5 kills over maps 1 through 3. Download the app today and use code Isaac for a first deposit match of up to $100. Or you can check out the link down in the pinned comment or the description. A huge shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. Moving on to K98 build number 2. I actually think this one is better, and it's kind of my secret sauce. So let's go ahead and set the baseline. The SPX is what I'm seeing most people running, but take a look at the stats. So you'll see it has an ADS speed of 390 milliseconds. Let's go ahead and take a look at my build. Okay, this build has an ADS speed of 374 milliseconds, but you'll notice we have a free attachment. It's because we're using the X10 intless scope, which not only has a high magnification, it also has a laser built in, which means I can throw on something like a no stock, which would make my ADS speed 322. Or I could throw on a sling like the target sling, which would bring it down to 348. I actually opt for the recon sling, and take a look at my flinch resistance. It goes minus 50%. So while I could make this gun snappier, what I opt to do is rock for the recon sling because this is only effective under 75 meters, right? So I either want it to be very fast on aim down sight, or I want it to be able to tank when I'm getting shot. I'm not looking towards the sky. And so what I've been doing is I'm rocking the recon sling. Even if someone challenges me with an AR, I'm still able to stay on target and hit clean shots. But what I would highly suggest, we have the essential 3 right here, right? That we talked about earlier with the sonic, precision, and high grain. From there, we rock the X10 intless, which has a 9x magnification. And then you can choose whatever you want. For me, I like the recon sling. If you want it to be a little bit snappier, rock something like the target sling. Or if you really want to go all out, rock the no stock. Although obviously some people are a little bit hesitant against the no stock because it can cause some issues with the aim walking stability, but totally up to you and your play style. Give you some options here, but this is my suggested build. As you can see, plenty of zoom. As I mentioned earlier, every scope in the game has that issue where like that dot is just a little bit to the right of your crosshair. Honestly, is it going to affect you? Probably not, but just still something to be aware of. And as you can see, it's a little bit snappier than the SPX build. Very clean sight. You still have a little bit of that dot because of the laser. And if you really wanted to make it extremely snappy, you could throw on the no stock. Now you have all the benefits of a long range, but now it's even snappier than what you had before. And sometimes no stock builds look really awkward, like you have a really tiny scope. You don't get that effect with the X10 intless, and I don't think enough people know about this scope. So this is my recommended build, especially with that recon sling, because it helps with that reduced flinch. I can't really show that off in the firing range, but trust me when I say this is my K98 build of choice. Let me know down in the comments what you think is best, whether the recon sling, no stock, or if there's another K98 build I should try out. But in the meantime, make sure you're taking your screenshot. Moving on to build number 3, it's our last sniper of the day, and you really need to reconsider running a long-range sniper like the Moors, and the build specifically I'm going to show you. Okay, the car can only one-shot headshot up to 75 meters. Its bullet velocity is only 920 meters per second. Even when you start to consider things like the actual damage profile, it starts to fall short. Now, there's 2 options for the Moors. There's the ton heavy barrel, and then there's the charge barrel. For me, the ton heavy barrel doesn't do it for me, okay? Because the ton heavy barrel only has a bullet velocity of 792. And when you start to hit things like the neck and the chest, it only does 179 damage, which is kind of underwhelming. When you factor in the charge barrel, you get 1,500 meter per second bullet velocity, and you're doing upwards of 257 up to 209 at max range to the chest. And here's my deal. Either rock a long-range power position sniper that's going to feel hit scan, or rock a super fast ADS sniper like the K98. And frankly, I know, and I've checked on both True Game Data and I've checked on TGD, True Game Data, and it says that this gun can one-shot headshot at all ranges, but I have countless clips of me using the Moors with the anti-material slug and getting hit mark indicators on headshots. Like, I feel like there's something bugged with the regular Moors. So for me, it's either I'm quick scoping or I'm absolutely ripping people across the map with this build right here. You guys know the Moors charge barrel, it feels dang near hit scan. 1,500 meters per second is absolutely absurd. You don't even need to fully charge it to get that full headshot damage. And you can see here, I'm rocking the same SPX scope that we've rocked on the K98. But the K98K actually can't rock one of my favorite scopes, which is the Heinrichter hybrid scope. And you guys know I love this because it also helps out, as opposed to the SPX, which doesn't. It helps out our aim down sight speed by 7%, and it makes for a really nice close range scope as well, because we can have a wider open sight for when we're quick scoping up close, or maybe a car's driving by and we need to track it. But if I need that long range precision, I can do that as well with the Heinrichter. Totally up to you which one you prefer. Everything else from there is pretty standard. We have the super light stock, the anti-material slug, the Choreo Laz, the Photonic, and the Heinrichter hybrid scope or the SPX based on your preference. But you really need to reconsider running some long range snipers, especially on the big map. Make sure you're taking your screenshot. And here's where we're going to get into it a little bit more rapid fire. We're going to cover some of the AR and long-range rifle meta. And if you weren't tracking, there were actually some changes to the meta a little bit. And this is probably the most significant one. It's the Holger 556. It got a 10-meter buff in its mid-range damage, which is actually really significant and brings it up to match with the MTZ 556. And on top of that, it also helps with the bullet velocity up by about 30 meters per second. You're not going to notice that too much, but I will say, after I've been using them more and more, I've actually been enjoying the Holger 556 as my main AR because of the fact that it has more of a vertical recoil than the MTZ, which has some of that horizontal shake. Now, I did break my personal record with the MTZ 556, but this is really easy to control. Now, we've covered all of these in terms of time to kill in the past, and it is no doubt in my mind the Holger 556 is one of the top contenders. Compared to things like the Holger 26 or even the SVA, at long ranges, the Holger 556 excels especially, and we built all these guns out specifically. We tested ADS time. Whenever you factor in getting that gun up, it actually crushes the Holger 26, the DGs, all the other weapons that we've covered in the past. So if you haven't already, give the Holger 556 a try. There are two different builds that I would suggest. One is this build right here. Go ahead and take your screenshot. This would be my low recoil, long range Holger 556. Now, if you're someone who can control recoil, I would suggest throwing on the Spirit Fire Suppressor because that brings our bullet velocity up to 1,026. Without it, with the billeted break, we're rocking only about 916, which is a little bit low for me. So if you have good recoil control, I would suggest rocking it with the Spirit Fire Suppressor. Throw on an iron sight that allows you to see through it. And I've dropped some high kill games with this. This is one of my favorite weapons to use inside the game right now. It's for more recoil control, but make sure if you haven't already, you take your screenshot. Moving on to weapon number 5, it is the MTZ 556. Once again, we've talked about this weapon. I do think it is very, very good when compared to the Holger. It has a little bit faster fire rate, so it's going to be more forgiving. But I think some people struggle with that horizontal recoil control. And it's the reason why I do not suggest running this with a suppressor. I only suggest running it with a Wrathguard compensator or maybe a Cassis if you're comfortable with it. I threw on the Wrathguard though because there's so much of that horizontal shake at range. I really prefer the Wrathguard over the Cassis and especially over a suppressor. But with this build specifically, I have ripped people across the map. Doesn't matter. Full plates. The MTZ 556 is definitely a worthwhile gun to use, but I think the average player might struggle a little bit with some of that horizontal shake as they're trying to track targets at long range. In general, vertical shake brings up a headshot. Horizontal shake pulls it off the shoulders and will cause you to miss shots. But this is definitely a worthwhile gun to use. If you haven't already, make sure you take your screenshot. Moving on to the next build. I'm in love with this. This is probably top 2 for me. Okay, right next to that Holger 556, it's the BP50. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the damage per mag that I think it could be really viable in trios quads. But, dude, in solos, once again, this is kind of the same setup where I would run a compensator if you're confident, if you're not so confident with your recoil control. But if you can, run it with a suppressor, which is what I've done. And I think I dropped like back-to-back 30s with this. And it's so good. Such little visual recoil. And with the Spirit Fire Suppressor, it brings our bullet velocity all the way up to 1141. The BP50 is getting slept on. Make sure you take your screenshot right here if you haven't already. The moat stock is key for getting rid of visual recoil. We have the 45 round mag, high velocity, heavy barrel, and Spirit Fire. If you need help with the recoil control, I recommend the Zim because it has a sharp vertical climb, which that clamps down on it. The Cassis is more for horizontal, so I would rock the Zim compensator if you need a little bit of help. Still 1,000 meters per second bullet velocity, so by all means, go for it. And this would be my suggestion for a little bit more recoil control on the BP50. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you appreciate all these builds that I have tested and vetted, like dozens of hours this season, I've been grinding. Make sure you drop a screenshot or you drop a subscription if you are taking a screenshot and drop a like while you're at it. Moving on to build number 7. I know we're talking long range today and I'm looking at the Superi. If you missed my last video, okay, the Superi as an AR, throw in the MTZ 556, throw in the BP50, throw in the Superi. It crushes all of them up close and also at long range as well. And especially when you factor in ADS, it's better than all of them. The Superi is surprisingly good. And I made a little adjustment to the build based off of what I showed you guys in the past. And it shoots even straighter now. I mean, this is ridiculous. I have a sniper support specific build, and this isn't it. This is like specifically for an AR build, but it has the damage per mag to back it up. This has more damage per mag than the MTZ 556, if I remember correctly. Like, there's no reason this should be this good as a long range AR. But I mean, look at the hands. Like, I'm hardly having to control the recoil on this. It is a very straight shooting gun. It has a clean iron sight, low visual recoil, and as you can see, that recoil pattern is very, very easy to control. So this is the build that I would suggest if you struggle with recoil control. Okay, this is like my ideal build for lowest recoil. Make sure you take a screenshot. Now, the Hound Guard Heavy is essential because it gives us the best bullet velocity. Same with the Monolith stock. It helps out with recoil control. But if you're confident with your recoil control, let me show you something else you can rock. Okay, the X10 Black Kite helps out by 7% with our recoil. But if you're very confident with your recoil control, what you can do is you can throw on the Sonic Suppressor, which would bring our bullet velocity up to 900. And 900 meters per second is great for an AR, by the way, but it doesn't affect our ADS. So that means we have a 250 millisecond ADS AR, which makes this thing so unreasonably snappy for an AR. Like a long range AR aiming down sight that fast and then shooting that straight is just ridiculous. Now, keep in mind, the Black Kite will help out a little bit more with our recoil control. So if you've tried this in the past and you struggle to beam people at range, consider trying that X10 Black Kite. But if you're fine with your recoil control, I mean, it's super fun. And it allows you to do things like running this as a main AR and then running shotguns as a secondary. And we'll cover close range in a future video, so make sure you're subscribed for that. But this is my aggressive Superi for the more recoil controlled player. I try to give multiple builds, right? I understand not everyone plays this game for a living like I do. Maybe they don't have the dexterity to control trigger with thumbstick like I do for playing this game like a living. So I try to give like relatable builds for everyone, and not just what is stat based or what is, you know, the fastest TTK. So I hope you guys appreciate that. Okay, here is something that we covered in a previous video, and I just want to rehash it real quick. It made a massive difference. If you had tried the SVA 545 in the past and you didn't like it, one thing that we discovered is the burst. What I'm going to do, just so you know, is I'm going to fire at all these dots, okay? We noticed that the burst is actually less accurate based off of our firing aiming stability stat. So you'll notice I'm trying to shoot at every other dot, and you'll notice there's a lot of irregularity with these patterns, and they can get pretty gnarly the farther you go along, and especially the faster that you shoot. So you'll see it's up left, up way left, right next to each other, up and way left, up, okay, way up, oh god, up right, up left, right on top of each other, up way right. What we ended up discovering is that your burst accuracy is tied to the firing aiming stability stat. So what we ended up finding was this combination of attachments results in an extremely accurate and consistent burst fire. So we'll do the exact same thing here. You'll see pretty much every single time these are right on top of each other, line on line, because what would end up happening is when you're firing these and you get these strays that are up way left, up or right, and this is actually some of the best spray pattern that I've seen, because this actually gets wild sometimes with way up to the left, way up to the right. And when it's like this, every single time, up, up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, it makes it to where when you were shooting the previous SVA builds, you would have shots that were going way off and way left to the target. But now you can accurately shoot these targets without having to worry about missing shots off to the left and the right. And if you haven't tried the SVA in a while because of that feeling like you were getting robbed, try it again with this new build, and you'll notice you will have significantly better, what honestly feels like hit registration, because the previous bursts were just going astray. So look at my accuracy up in the top left, 100%. Well, that was 100% until I fired one too many times. 100%. And 95%, but it's only because the second bullet of the burst missed because the first bullet killed. This SVA is significantly better than previous SVAs I've used in the past, and it also has a bullet velocity of 1,000 meters per second, and obviously it has legitimately almost zero recoil because you can spam this as much as you want in that single fire mode, and it will not move off of where you're shooting. So this is the SVA 545 new 0 recoil. Make sure if you haven't already, you take a screenshot. Moving on to build number 9, it is the Holger 2.6. This is tried and true. It has one of the best time to kills in the game. I have 2 different builds for you. Now, this one right here is going to have lower visual recoil, but it's going to have less, like, bullet velocity. And for me, if I'm using an LMG, I want damage per mag, and I want bullet velocity, and obviously I want the time to kill to back it up. This only brings it to about 938 meters per second, which is like my bare minimum for an LMG, because you have to keep in mind, it also has an ADS speed of 414. So I would rather be running something like an AR that has a faster ADS and the same bullet velocity. So for me, while this is an option, and you should take your screenshot, I would suggest running this build right here, where we ditch the optic. And if we're going to use an LMG, we take advantage of it by running high velocity, bringing that bullet velocity all the way up to 1126. And this has clean enough iron sights. It's one of my favorite weapons to use inside of the game. It still shoots extremely straight. And as we've seen in previous videos, we know that the Holger 2.6 is one of the fastest killing guns in the game. Great mid-range and fantastic all the way up there with the BP-50 and the Superi AR. Now, obviously, when you factor in things like aim down sight, it doesn't get as strong, but it has great damage per mag. Tried and true, one of the best weapons of the game. If you're not using it, go ahead and take your screenshot right now. Now, for number 10 and actually number 11 as well, people have been asking for some low recoil builds, and I've got a couple different options for you here. So we're going to take a look at the Tac Evolve here. And while it doesn't have the best time to kill, we've mentioned it in the past as still being a pretty decent option, mainly because it has a 100-round mag and very limited recoil. This whole conversation, right, of effective time to kill versus actual time to kill, it's pretty dang good because of that low recoil. Now, against a good player, shooting straight, probably with one of the builds that I gave you earlier, they're going to beat you. But if you need something that has less recoil, consider trying this. Now, one of the biggest things that I emphasize with the Tac Evolve here whenever I talk about it is it's got straight up recoil until it starts pulling hard left to right. So these are actually recoil plots with the Spirit Fire Suppressor. But what I've done to create a recoil plot that's a lot, you'll still have some horizontal, like minor horizontal shake, but it's not the super hard pulls that you can see in some of these different plots. What I end up doing is I'll rock the Hound Grip. And while it doesn't have firing aiming stability, it does help out with our horizontal recoil control. And for me, that combined with the Zim allows us to get a lot more horizontal recoil control. You could throw on something like the Cassis, but you know, you got to keep in mind, not every time that you're going to fire this gun are you going to fire 25 bullets and start reaching into this. Sometimes they'll be dead within that shot, right? So you don't want to build completely for that. But as you can see here, a super straight shooter, a lot of damage per mag. Keep in mind, I already dumped, 15 rounds over there. You can absolutely rip people. Imagine running this with like Combat Scout and you're holding someone's cross as they're going through the smoke. Like, there's a lot of damage to be put out with this weapon. There's some different options that you could run. You could get rid of things like high velocity for an optic. But in my opinion, with bullet velocity of 1,000 and with a pretty slow ADS of 519, yeah, I mean, you could throw on something like a Razorhawk Light but for me, this is a very specific use case gun. This is a heavy firing weapon meant for 0 recoil and high bullet velocity. Like, I build things intentionally. If I'm building an LMG, I'm not going to build it to try to be like an AR and throw a laser on it, because there's probably an AR that will outperform it, like the builds I showed you earlier. But if I'm going to build an LMG, I want it to rip like a squad assault weapon, low recoil, high fire rate, high bullet velocity, and that's exactly what this does. So if you're interested, go ahead and give it a try. This is my Tac Evolve your build. Make sure you take a screenshot. Now, I do have a little bonus one. They did buff the MCW. Okay, we've seen the stats. We've talked about it on stream. If you haven't checked out my stream before, make sure it'll be linked in the description. It's over on Twitch. They increased the min damage from 20 up to 22. Basically, what that means is it's going to perform better at long ranges. The min damage is the minimum amount of damage that you will receive or that it will put out at longer ranges, which means MCW actually does a lot better than it used to. It's right up there with the Holger. I'm not completely sold on it yet, though. I'm not completely sold on it. This is my favorite build that I've made for it so far, okay? It has a very clean iron sight, and for me to really love this weapon, I need it to have the super high bullet velocity, because it's not really good at mid ranges compared to things like the BP50, Superi, MTZ 556. And so if this is going to be my long range weapon, it needs to have fast bullet velocity, period. If it excels at long range TTK, that's what it needs to excel at as well, is bullet velocity. So this brings it up to 1140 with the Spirit Fire Suppressor, the Cyclone Barrel, the Bruin Heavy Support, high velocity, and the 60 round drum. You can get rid of the high velocity for something like the Jack Glassless. Just keep in mind, it's going to affect your bullet velocity. Now, people know the MCW for having low recoil, but in my opinion, it has a pretty sharp climb, like a BP50-esque climb. Watch how quickly this climbs. That's pretty fast. Like within 20 bullets, it's already off of that chart. A lot of CDL pros actually will end up running this gun, like Call of Duty League. The guys that play this game for a living, the best players in the world, will use this with actually what's called the billeted brake, which we know from previous builds helps clamp down on that vertical recoil. Obviously, they're not rocking the 60 round mag and stuff like that, but that allows them, as you see there, it took 30 bullets for me to get off the chart as opposed to 20. But in my opinion, it has a steady recoil, and it's really useful in the CDL because they're trying to rip people off of head glitches in just a couple bullets. So they're not firing 30 bullets at a time. They're firing in like 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet bursts. So it makes sense for them. For us, as Warzone players, I think it makes sense to have the Spirit Fire because it clamps some of that horizontal side to side, which will pull us off target. And this, since it's a steady rate and not a ramping rate or anything like that, you just build that relationship. And then, as you can see here, I will set my finger on where that recoil control is, and then I just won't move my finger, and it just stays in the exact same spot, right? So it's all just about building that relationship with the gun. As you learn the MCW, you get a couple games in with it, it'll start to work well for you. This is my suggested build if you rock the iron sight. Screenshot. And then, of course, if you want the Jack Glassless, feel free to throw that on as well. This is my alternate build here as well. But ladies and gentlemen, if you guys appreciated the time I spent in perfecting all of these builds, because these ones I legitimately have spent a lot of time in game with testing out, make sure you drop a like on this video, subscribe for even more. Huge shout out again to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. And if you want, join me live over on Twitch where I capture the gameplay for all of these. I can answer any questions, and oftentimes we end up trying out a lot of new builds that you guys suggest. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Make sure to hang around for a future video where we're going to have the close range meta, because we got some new contenders in there as well. See you all in the next one. Peace.